It's been 20 years since the Toyota Supra left American shores, and Toyota fans like me have been waiting ever since for it to make its return. Well, I'm happy to say the Supra is back, and this is it. This is the production 2020 Toyota Supra coming to dealerships soon at a starting price of $50,000. No, it's not cheap, and this isn't the basic raw sports car that I think a lot of you were hoping for, but frankly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's dive into some of the details, and then we'll take it for a spin, and I'll let you know if this was all worth the wait. The new Supra is a front-engined, rear-drive sports car, and that very much fits in the general template of those Supras that came before. However, where those were 2+2s, this new one is strictly a two-seater. It's actually a much smaller car, 5 whole inches shorter than the old model, yet 2 inches wider, a recipe that should make for sweeter handling. Believe it or not, it's lighter too, despite having a whopping 8 airbags. Okay, we're talking about 3,400 pounds versus 3,500, but still, it's not too often that a new generation car actually goes on a diet, and that is something worth celebrating. Power comes from a 3-liter turbocharged inline-six, just like before, but where the last Supra made 321 horsepower, this new motor does 335. Okay, maybe not a major leap forward, but this motor will also do 31 miles per gallon on the highway, which is a big step up over the 22 in the last gen Supra. Yeah, I know, no one's buying a Supra for the fuel economy, but considering it was emissions that ultimately killed the Supra off here in the US, I thought that was worth pointing out. While the numbers between the new motor and the old one may line up pretty well, this is of course a completely new engine, which means it drives completely differently. Those 90s turbocharged motors, well, you'd put your foot to the floor, you'd count to 3, and then the fun would start. In this new one, pretty much just put your foot to the floor and there's an immediate rush of torque, 365 pound-feet to be exact. That immediate response makes this car feel very quick. And it is very quick, with a 0 to 60 time of just 4.1 seconds. But if there's some fly in the ointment, if there's something that makes this feel a little bit less than perfect, it's the sound. There's a digital augmentation that's been added to make this car sound a little bit racier. And I'll be honest, I don't really like it very much. It makes it sound like a BMW. Did I forget to mention that this car is basically a BMW? Yes, the Mark V Supra and the BMW Z4 share more than a little bit of DNA, though Toyota's badge engineering here isn't quite as straightforward as it was working with Subaru to create the BRZ and the 86. The Supra looks quite a bit different than the Z4, but beneath that skin, the engine, the chassis, suspension, electronics, it's all BMW and it's all assembled in Austria. Even this interior feels very German, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't exactly feel like a Toyota in here, except for the steering wheel, which is both smaller and thinner than your average BMW unit. There's also this gauge cluster, which has this kind of neat 3D effect going on with the tachometer. It's kind of silly and kind of fun, and if anything, I think a lot of Toyota Supra fans were worried when they learned that BMW would be building the next car, that it wouldn't be fun. And I'm glad to say that this car is plenty fun indeed. Though far heavier than the GT86 and lacking that car's flat boxer engine, the new Supra actually has a lower center of gravity. It also has a perfect 50-50 weight distribution and rides on adaptive suspension on all 4 corners, meaning it can go from hard to soft at the touch of a button. And every Supra has a proper electronically actuated limited-slip rear differential, helping to ensure that all 335 ponies find their way to the ground through both of the 275/35 19-inch rear tires. We're starting out here on the road because, of course, most Supra owners will be driving their cars on the road, and it is, of course, a very nice road car. It's comfortable, it's quiet, the ride quality is actually quite nice, and that's despite having giant 19-inch wheels on the front and on the back. The steering response is light, but it feels good out here on the twisty roads, and the transmission is, well, it's unobtrusive, it's doing everything it needs to do, it's smooth, and it's giving me the gears I want when I want to. So on the road, overall, A+, but I know a lot of you are wondering, what is this thing like on the tracks? So let's make that our next stop. All right, let's head out on the track and see how the Supra can handle some very difficult conditions. We are at Summit Point. This is the Shenandoah circuit, which is perhaps the tightest and twistiest racetrack I have ever been on. This place makes Tail the Dragon look like a relaxed Sunday drive. Not only that, it's pretty bumpy, a lot of surface changes, a lot of elevation changes, blind corners, off-camber stuff. Let's just say this is a really good test for the Supra, but I'm not sure this is exactly the perfect place to be showing off what the Supra can do. It's so tight and twisty, and the Supra's got a little bit of a soft suspension to it. Even here in sport mode, the car's got a fair bit of roll, which means you need to be kind of patient as you're going through these tighter, twistier bits. It's a really great place to drive the 86 around, and Toyota's also got some of those rolling around here too. But for a car like the Supra, I think we need a little bit more room to let it stretch its legs. That doesn't mean, however, that it's doing a bad job here. Far from it. It's actually handling things really well. All those surface imperfections and bumps, the suspension's doing a really good job of coping with those. It's showing that it's actually really nicely balanced. Yeah, and the lower speed stuff, it's tending toward understeer, but that's easy enough to correct for if you're a little bit patient again. And of course, you've got all that great torque coming on really quick and really early, which makes this car a lot of fun to drive. Now, what about that transmission? Yes, it's an 8-speed automatic, but it is the ZF 8-speed, which is probably the best automatic on the market right now for this kind of application anyway. And I think the best thing that I can say about the automatic is that I'm not really thinking about it. Yeah, I've got paddles here, so if I want to be shifting, I can be shifting. But honestly, I'm just letting the car do its thing, and it's doing a pretty good job. There are a few cases in the slower steady-state corners like this where maybe I wish I were a gear higher. And a couple of cases where I've had to actually slow down to get around another car. And in that case, it's again been in a gear too high and it's had to downshift for me coming out of the corner. But otherwise, it's actually doing a really nice job of anticipating my needs, of holding the right gear at the right time, and giving me effectively what I want without my having to try and override it. The few times I have tried to override it with the paddles, it's been a little bit reluctant at times to downshift when I want to. But ultimately, as is usually the case in a modern sports car with an automatic transmission, leave it alone and it does just fine. Now for me, a big concern whenever I get in a sports car and head out to the racetrack is whether I have enough headroom for a helmet. And I gotta say, I'm surprised there's actually plenty of headroom in here. I've got a little bit of gap between my helmet and the headliner, and I wouldn't have expected that looking at the car. But that's all thanks to this double bubble roof, which may give me good headroom here, but actually getting in the car with a helmet on is really tricky. I've literally been in race cars with race cages that are easier to climb into than this thing. I have to do some really good yoga before I can climb in here without knocking my head against that door frame. But once I'm in here and situated, the seat's comfortable, it's giving me good support. Got a nice little pad here in the center bolster to keep my knee from getting too raw, and pretty good place to do some laps. So how is the Supra as a track car? Pretty solid, actually. I am quite impressed, especially given how good this thing is when it comes to the grand touring side of the equation. It's responsive, it's fun. Yeah, this track is maybe a little too twisty to really show off what it can do, but ultimately, I think you could have a lot of fun on a racetrack. And the good news is, if you buy one of these cars, Toyota actually wants you to take it to the racetrack. They're going to give you a free membership to NASA and a free track day. And I haven't heard of a manufacturer doing that since, I think the Subaru WRX days, last time I remember it anyway. That's actually really encouraging that Toyota actually wants their owners to take these things to the track. And frankly, you should.
But we can't overlook perhaps the biggest flaw of this new Supra, the one that everyone has opined about extensively since it made its debut earlier this year, and that's the styling. You, of course, can make up your own mind here, but if you want my opinion, I actually do like the shape of the Supra. I like it quite a bit. It's purposeful and aggressive, and that double bubble roof not only provides great headroom, but also just makes the car look shrink-wrapped. It looks so much better in person than it does on the internet, but, and this is a big but, even I can't get over that nose. It looks to me like Toyota was trying way too hard to make this thing look like a Formula One car, a sport that Toyota has had no involvement in for the past decade. And then there are the vents. All these black plastic scoops and ducts in the front fenders, the rear fenders, the doors, all blocked off and all completely non-functional. That is disappointing to say the least.
So that is the new Supra. Maybe not the bonkers sports car you were hoping for, but then the Mark IV wasn't really like that either. Just because every tuner from here to Hakone gutted the things and put big silly exhausts in the back doesn't mean they were anything like that when they left the showroom floor. And those same tuners will find plenty to do on the new Supra too. Toyota's already reaching out to them to make sure they have all the data they need to start fiddling, and I can't wait to see what they come up with. And what about that $50,000 price? Well, the last Supra, when it was sold here in the US, started at $40,000 in 1998. In today's money, that's way over 60 grand. So the new Supra is lighter, cheaper, faster, and safer. In other words, what's not to like? But let me know what you think in the comments, and make sure you like and subscribe, and then check out theroadshow.com for all the details of the new Toyota Supra.